Hello and welcome to Comedy in a Nutshell, the podcast with me, your host, Mark Decano, comedian, writer, broadcaster, all words which don't apply to me, but do apply to my guests. Each a fantastic artist with a particularly comedic bent, who each episode ask about their life and career and how they would sum up comedy in a nutshell. I'm the comedy nerd who's seen more than 1,800 different comedians perform live comedy, and you can find out more about my journey in comedy fandom on my website, thecomedynerd.com. Please also take a moment to like, subscribe, rate, review and share the podcast. Thank you. My guest this episode was raised near San Francisco, of British and El Salvadorian heritage, and has made her mark on the British comedy circuit as a fantastic stand-up comedian, with appearances at The Funny Women, The Pleasance Reserve and a stand-up debut at the Edinburgh Fringe last year. It's stand-up comedian Katie Green. So if we go all the way back to the beginning, what was comedy's earliest influence on you growing up?
Well, my family was, my grandpa's British. So I think he kind of really brought the British humor to my household. He was always making jokes, always like, he was a really big jokester. So it was always, he was always trying to get a laugh. So I think that's where it really came from.
Yeah. Did you have specific comedians or shows that you watched or talked about that influenced you in that way?
Not really. I mean, even when I started stand-up, I didn't know who Jerry Seinfeld was. and when people talked about him, I was like, why are people? I got Jerry Seinfeld and Jerry Springer confused.
Right.
So when people were talking about, oh my God, like Seinfeld, like Jerry Seinfeld is like is like, you know, the best, da da da, and I'd be like, is Jerry Springer really that funny? Like I was so confused. So I don't think I like properly got into like stand-up comedy until I started doing it.
Yeah. So what was your route into stand-up comedy? Because you studied acting initially, didn't you?
Yeah. So I was doing an acting course, and then someone suggested I try stand-up, and then I did like a stand-up course, and then I kind of just fell in love with it. It was a really nice way to express myself. I think, I was in community college and trying to do like theater, and it was cool. And I was in San Francisco. It was a nice hobby in the beginning, and then it became really serious.
What was the comedy scene in San Francisco like there?
It was cool. I mean, it's grown a lot since I started, and it was small, but I think it's a good place to start because you can kind of figure out what about stand up without having the pressure of the big cities like LA and New York.
It was specifically a stand-up course that you did.
Yeah. It was a specific stand-up course, San Francisco Comedy College, it was called. And yeah, I mean, it's like any stand-up course. Like you don't really learn you just kind of do it, and like people give feedback and it was cool though, because I had no expectations. And I think that really helped me in the beginning. I didn't know, there was no one I was trying to be. There was no one I was like modeling my act over. Like I was just kind of talking.
Yeah.
And I think that really helped kind of shape me and what I am now, I guess.
Yeah. So the course came with a showcase then at the end. Yeah.
Came with a showcase. The showcase was at the Purple Onion, which is quite an iconic San Francisco venue. So no longer there anymore. But it was really cool. And I started I did a lot of impressions. So I was going to community college and I would just do impressions of people like in my class.
Right.
Rude, but yeah. So it was fun. It was fun, and then you just become addicted to it.
Yeah. So how was that showcase then? Did you get the bug straight away? Was it, were you nervous? How did it go across that first show?
Yeah, I did get the bug straight away.
Yeah.
But it was still hobby. I think I didn't really take it seriously until I moved to LA. And even then, the first few years of college, I was like, I'm an experienced college.
Yeah.
So I'd say like when I was doing my master's degree, that's when I was fully like, okay, I gotta really figure out what I want to do, and if it's stand up, and then if it is stand up, I gotta take it seriously. Because I was like, I would dabble in it. I was like in San Francisco, it was a bit like more like, I'd go up a few times a week. I'd go to all the open mics, and LA was the same.
Yeah.
But then it'd be like weeks or months of not going up, and it didn't really count. But but yeah, I think it the bug kind of it's quite addicting, stand up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got your master's degree in Latin American studies.
Yes.
And decided the best thing you could do with that was come to London and do comedy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I always wanted to move to London. I always wanted to move. Like even like when I first moved to LA, I told my college roommate, I was like, after I'm done, I'm going to London. And I was obsessed with London. I mean, like my duvet cover was the London Underground, which is probably the geekiest thing, but also I seriously wanted to move.
Well, what was the allure?
I think because my grandpa was, I mean, my grandpa is from here. So I think that was the biggest allure. But I do think also when I was doing my master's and doing comedy at the same time, LA is a hard place to like figure out who you are. And I think I wanted to see that I could do stand up regularly and also figure out who I am without the stress of LA.
Yeah.
And the stress of New York, I guess. So London, I think, was the best. And I'd always wanted to move. So I thought I might as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So having then started to establish yourself as a stand-up, you said you didn't go in with any expectations. Did you encounter surprises? Was it everything that you maybe started to imagine when you started out?
No, you know what? It's weird when you don't have the expectations, because then they start to develop, like, I think I did, there was nothing to compare it to, some people wanted certain things, or they wanted, and that stuff all came gradually for me, in terms of like the comparing myself to like, oh, I got to be like this, or I got to do like that. And so I guess that was a battle in itself for when that came to that I had to deal with.
Yeah.
So, but I don't think that, I think, I bombed a lot, but I think bombing doesn't really matter as much until you start being like, I want to do this seriously. When it's just a hobby, it's like, whatever.
Yeah.
The worst bomb I ever had was in London. I was here, and I'd only been doing comedy maybe about a year. And wasn't consistent year. It was like a dabbling. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go to an open mic in London, and I bombed so hard, and I didn't do comedy for like another year. It was really bad, and I think that really shook me.
Yeah,
it was so bad. It's actually what I wrote my college like application about. Like one of the essays I wrote about how this is so sad. But like how impactful the not doing well in a different country is, especially in a country that's like, it's not a culture I don't completely not know. I mean, I grew up with like my grandpa was the main man in my household, so it was like Britishness was very, wasn't like I wasn't aware, but I bombed so hard.
It's interesting that this British influence in your household while living in the US, and of course then you're doing performances in the US, and I can only imagine that the two things were different. So what was performing comedy in the US and as opposed to performing in the UK? How do they compare? Or how did they compare for you?
Well, I think in the beginning, it was like, I mean, that bomb specifically, I remember there's quite a few references that I was doing that weren't understood, which I think it's a very popular problem for anyone going over anywhere. It's always the references.
Yeah.
I think there was just like, I don't, it's actually really hard to, the question of like what American audiences and British audiences like, and because people, this is a big question I get about like, how is it different or how have you changed?
Mm.
And I think it's just really understanding that, because I don't actually think the humor is that, like that different.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's funny is funny. I think it's just about relatability.
Mm.
So I think in the beginning, and it's sometimes even when I go back to America, I find it the first few shows, I'm like, ooh, this is so much of my set now is like I'm an American living in London. Like this is my experiences.
Yeah.
And like, you know, going back home, people are like, I don't care. Like, who cares? But I do think that I think just the relatability thing and changing that and really like kind of knowing who you're talking to. I think everyone, no matter where you go, appreciates a foreigner having an understanding of who they're speaking to.
Yeah. Well, who is that person, you know, on stage? How much of that is you? Are you playing a character of yourself, an extension of yourself?
I'm like material wise it's incredibly honest.
Mm.
Like my friend actually the other day, he after my show, he was like, I always he asked me if something was real, and I was like, you know who you're speaking to, and he's like, I always forget that when I'm watching you that everything you said is 100% real. Like I wish I had more of an imagination, but I yeah, no, I think the only thing that's not real is I guess the confidence that's portrayed.
Mm-hmm.
I think people think because I'm an American that I just, and also because of the way, because I do clubs, so I think you have to have a certain thick skin.
Mm.
While and I also like, yeah, it's not that even that I do clubs. I grew up like kind of learning how to be a club comic.
Right.
And really kind of enforcing that, like you've got the few seconds to get them and don't show weakness. And I think that it, like people will describe me as confident, but I don't find myself confident at all. So, but I think it's kind of it's hard to convey that I'm insecure on stage. Like, it's like, I'm confident on stage, but not in real life.
Yeah.
Like, so it's a bit, it's a challenge. I think that's the biggest thing that's not authentically me.
But you have a very sort of, I don't know, sassy style on the stage.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do come across as confident, but it's very, you know, sometimes it's sassy, sometimes it's a bit flirty. You engage with the audience quite a lot. I mean, is that something you're allowed to let out on stage because you're performing?
I think it's something that I'm allowed. I always thought when I first, like when I was first getting serious about it, I always thought that like my presence on stage was just me if I could say and do anything that I wanted to do. Like it was in every like joke I kind of had was like what I would do if I could have done it. So I guess sometimes if I'm being flirty or whatever, because it's something that I don't normally do in real life. And like sassy, like I can be sassy on stage, but like sometimes I get too scared and like with flirting, sometimes I'll get too scared. So I think it does allow me to be like a version of myself that's what I could do if I was really confident.
What about, do you have like a competitive streak? Because I know that you were a finalist at Funny Women. How do you fare in competitions? How do you view competitions? Are you competitive?
I'm competitive in sport, but I don't think of comedy as a sport. And I don't think of it as like I think of it very much so like we're all in our own lane. And I think even just looking at the other lanes is just really is so toxic to your own path. I think the hardest thing about comedy is enforcing into yourself that like you're on your own journey and no one else is like you. Because that's the only thing that's really the only thing that only way people really properly supersede is understanding that they have a product that's different than other people. So I'm not necessarily competitive. Like if someone's doing something that, oh, I got to do that. Because a lot of the times people, and then I think that's what's nice about being in the UK is that a lot of people want to do things that I don't necessarily want to do, or that don't mean as much to me.
Yeah.
Like certain things mean so much to certain people, and it's because I grew up around it, and it's like, and different things mean things to me. Like I'd love to do a lot of things, but most of my benchmark stuff are all still in the US,
right?
Which makes it difficult to be here. But
so, having been doing stand up then for a while, and then we encountered lockdown. Where were you at the time? Were you in UK, in the US? How did you deal with the lockdown?
So went back to the US. Well, I only came here for a few months before, and then just to see if I liked London as a place, and then February 2020, I was just naturally going back home, and I think over lockdown was really when I was like, I think I just want to move to London, and I think it was nice coming back to London because London opened up a bit more for comedy before the rest of the world. Unless it was Texas. Texas was going strong. But yeah, that's I think lockdown kind of helped me really figure out, okay, what do I want and where do I want to be?
Yeah. So did you spend that time thinking that once you realized that this is what you wanted to do, did you spend time writing? Were you doing Zoom gigs? How did it work for you?
I wrote. I did a lot of reading. And I did only a handful of Zoom gigs. I'd say maybe 3 or 4. I mean, I hated them. Everyone hated them. I think one of the funny ones, the semifinal was on Zoom.
Yeah.
So it was, yeah, I didn't love them. It wasn't something that I wanted to do. I think it was like, it wasn't anything that I was like, gotta be doing gigs, because it didn't really count for me to be doing the Zoom gigs.
Right.
I get also way more stressed in doing Zoom gigs than I didn't like doing live shows.
Yeah. Well, subsequent to that, you were part of the Pleasance Reserve, which is quite an achievement. And that obviously took you to Edinburgh. Was that the first time you've been to the Fringe?
I had been to the Fringe maybe once or twice, just as a spectator. And just for a few days apiece. And but going for the Pleasance was the first time that I was able to be there for the whole month and really, really get the whole Fringe experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how was that experience?
The Reserve was great. I mean, I loved my group. We were all really close. Me and Dee are still incredibly close, and Abby and Ty. You become like this family.
Yeah.
It was great. It was stressful, but also it was. I think it was quite impactful for me to be like, okay, I have a place not just in the Reserve, but also I have value in the UK just because of the prestige that the Reserve has. So as a foreigner, I do think it meant a bit more, maybe, because it did kind of solidify this fact that, like, okay, you're on the right path into being in a new place, you know?
Yeah. What about the festival broader as a whole? You know, you're competing for attention with thousands of shows. You've got this intense, bustling city, and it's very in your face at that particular time. Did you watch other shows? Were you able to separate yourself from the show you had to do and explore the larger festival over a longer period of time?
Yeah, I think. Well, for my Reserve year. You get stressed. So you get stressed with you get overwhelmed with how much there is to do and what to see, but there's also no pressure. The pressure is only your show but in a different way that other people have. I think it's always nice to see. I try to see as many shows as I can. I think some people get too in their head about seeing other stuff, but I think it's great. I think it's nice to be able to have the experience to see as much as you can, and but it's also it's like the hardest it's like the hardest experience or thing for a comedian, because you're constantly being like felt like you're in you feel like you're in a competition, but you also want to enjoy the actual festival and being up there. So it is mentally challenging.
Yeah.
And it's freezing.
Was it easier because you were part of that group that you were talking about, because you had people around you sharing the same experience?
Yeah, that does make it easier. But then, some nights people killed and sometimes people didn't. So it did make it awkward sometimes, sometimes it was stressful, or sometimes people would overrun and we had to share the hour 15. So yeah. So it does. And then also some people were in better positions. Like my agent retired halfway through and I'd only signed like 3 months before. So I was incredibly stressed. But I think it was also just stressful because I'm like, everything was new.
Yeah.
So, and I also think it's quite like people prioritize things. Like certain things are important in the fringe where they're not important anywhere else in the world ever.
Yeah.
Whereas like reviews and nominations and all that stuff is like so important. Whereas the rest of the world, you're just like in this echo chamber and the rest of the world's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So it does feel like it was nice to have a community and to have the others to be a part of something. But at the same time, I do think the fringe is nice because you can kind of see the way that the people's careers are kind of branching out.
Yeah. And of course, the next year you went back with Dee and you did the split bill.
I did a split bill with Dee. And we did it at a burrito and shake.
Yeah.
Famously an iconic, the most iconic, I'd say, of any venues. And yeah, we did a split bill. That was fun. We had a really, really good time. It was nice to be back with her.
Yeah.
And then the next year I did my debut show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So doing the debut, you no longer have the group of people around you. You no longer have Dee there as a partner. Now it's all you. And in previous years, punters might have come to see the Pleasance Reserve, but this time they're coming to see you specifically. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Dee and I did, and also Abby, we all debuted the same year.
Yes.
And I mean, the bond that I had with them was like, it's still, every time I go back to Edinburgh, it's like, this is like a trauma bond, So Dee and I were hanging out pretty much every day. Dee came to so many of my shows, and it was so, like, what it meant for me was like, it was so valuable. It was just to see her, and even to have her see the show so many times. And it was just great. I loved her show, and you just have this bond, and you have the support. And so even though, not having that cohort necessarily, or like not even living in the same space, but it was every day we met up, and every day, we were able to complain but also move forward. I think that a lot of our discourse was mainly like, okay, this is it, but let's go on.
Yeah. How did it feel having that full hour to really, tell your stories and sort of, unwinding and spreading your wings, for want of a better metaphor, as opposed to all the club sets?
Yeah, it's so different. It's so different, but also it's different to have an audience that's not a club. It's hard to the transition. I don't think I fully got used to it until maybe the last week, and I'm like, well, what? But I think that's what Edinburgh's about. I mean, other people will say differently, but for me, it was incredibly useful, and it felt really nice to be able to have the hour and also to have people know me in a way that was more vulnerable or less like kind of just trying to always strive for a laugh. And because I think with a club, you're fighting for last per minute.
Yeah.
But also it's also challenging because I think in Edinburgh it really makes you feel, especially if you're a foreigner, it really makes you feel different. And I think that was one of the hardest challenges in London. It's so nice to be able to go into almost any room and to have people know what Latinos are, but also like know about the culture, a bit better understanding. But I think it really wore on me to have like so many shows of not having people of like a similar culture be represented in the shows. So it kind of felt like I had to spend a time period teaching or like just like not well understood.
Right.
And it's like, and this is where the contrast of because I told myself after the first Edinburgh after last year, which was the debut, I told myself that every year I'm going to focus on something that I've always wanted to do instead of doing something that the industry or whatever prioritizes. And so I think me going to, all of January I spent in Mexico City translating my show. And then I was in Brazil in March and doing shows out there. So for me, that was so to be in front of an audience that really gets you.
Yeah.
Is so the change and the difference is like there is a feeling of like, wow, it's really nice to be completely understood instead of like having to like try to fight for them to be like, no, I swear I'm normal.
How important is it to you? Because these are all personal references. Obviously, you as a comedian, you talk about what you know, but like you say, some of those things might not necessarily weigh on the consciousness of the audience. How important is it that you're kind of talking about these, I guess, specific references that might not otherwise be understood, that you make them understood? How much is that part of who you are and what you want to talk about on stage?
Yeah, I think I think like I've always been quite fascinated in culture and how like the cultural coming together of things. And I think that's where I just think that growing up in a house that was like British and Latin, I think that's, and like how communication was had and what the blend was.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to me to figure out how to be able to use my voice to show something or to have people understand what it is.
Yeah.
And so it is important. And it's hard. It's hard like it's hard doing a show and being like, ooh, those people did not get it. But also like primarily it's me not connecting with them, It's like that's the thing. It's like I wasn't able to properly convey what I was trying to say. And so it's all a journey.
Yeah. I mean, were you mindful of the fact that this show, Aimia, was your debut show? And was that an increased pressure that this is the show that announces you to the industry and to the world?
Yeah, I think so. I think yes and no. I mean, I think the pressure that I think I lost myself a bit in terms of doing things that people said I should do or doing things that people are supposed to do. And I think that was my biggest lesson. I think at the Fringe, the best part about it is the lessons that you learn. And other people will say it's getting nominated or something. But I do think for me, it was incredibly valuable because I think it really shone light on the fact that I was kind of getting away from what I wanted or what I want, like what I desired, and also what I want to do as a comic.
Mm.
And so it was useful. It was incredibly useful to have like 25 or 26 days in a row doing shows and working on the hour. But I think I put less pressure on myself. I didn't really care as much in terms of this is my debut to the industry, because I think that it's very small. I guess, and it's just like the importance of it is not as big to me and in my life than it is to other people. And I also think it's like, I'm not a comic that's nice. I'm not like an industry darling, or I'm not like someone that's, let's elevate her voice to the British people, like it's so, and I'm totally like, I'm okay with that. Like so I think that's why it doesn't really, it like certain things affected a lot of other people differently. And I think that for me, the Fringe was, I just learned a lot about myself. I spent a lot of money, and that was the hardest part.
Yeah. But you'll be going back.
Yes, I'm actually really excited. I'm excited. I'm doing 2 weeks. I'm doing a split bill with my good friend Evaldes Carosas, and yeah, I'm really excited. He I was pretty adamant that I was never going to go back again. I told everyone, I was like, I won't be back here. You'll never see me again. I'm never leaving my August. Ever. Like, no, I'm never going to wear a raincoat in August ever again. And still, he got me. I'm excited about our show. Our show's called What Men Want. And it's just because we're polar opposites in terms of what we talk about. So much of my material is me trying to figure out what men want, and then so much of his material is saying what men want. And I think it's going to be really fun. He's one of my favorite comics to watch, so it's going to be great to have 2 weeks be able to do a show and watch one of my favorite comics. So I'm really excited.
You've talked about taking the chance to see other comics, particularly around the Fringe, and you've just mentioned about seeing Evaldes. How do you watch comedy? Do you just absorb it, or do you watch it now with a comedian's analytical mindset, do you think?
Maybe it's a bit more analytical. But it's also like I'm not someone who, there's certain comics will try not to laugh. Like I'm not someone who like tries not to laugh. But I think you get a bit desensitized. There's certain things that won't make me laugh as much, like that'll make other room laugh.
Yeah.
Like, when it comes to like crowd work and stuff like that, especially because I MC so much, like you see so much of, like, you see the little tricks.
Yeah.
It's like knowing the magic tricks, But yeah, I still, like, when I'm present, I really like to enjoy it as much as every other spectator. Probably a bit more, I guess, because I get, and there's certain people I love watching, like I love watching, like Jinhao Lee was amazing last year, and I love watching him every single time I see him. Sean Walsh is somebody that every time he has a show, I have to see it.
Yeah.
It's just so enjoyable to watch, and yeah, it's nice being able to have a community of people that are like, they're just so funny.
Yeah. Does being in a community with these people, being able to watch them and enjoy them so much, does that continue to inspire you? Does it keep you going?
Yeah, I think so, because it's when most of my social group is comedians, so the discourse tends to be comedy adjacent, or even if it's just about life, there will be like someone will try to get a joke in.
Yeah.
Having comedians as your friend group is nice, because it feels like it's like this challenging thing of like it's nice because you feel like you're always working, but at the same time it's always fun. Like hanging out with people who aren't in comedies is kind of hard, especially because like most of my friend group or most of the people I talk to every day are comedians.
Yeah. What about so we've talked about you performing an hour, we've talked about you doing club set, and you mentioned emceeing. Where do you think that you find that you're happiest, when you get to do that long form or the punchy jokes per minute, or maybe in the writing process? What's your comfort zone?
I think I'm happiest in front of people who like want to see me and who like me as a comic. I think then I'm able to do it all. You know what I mean? I'm able to talk to people. I'm able to be punchy. I think also I like to write on stage, so it's nice having a longer time frame and then being able to just work things out on stage. Um, and I think being in a room where I'm comfortable, I like leaving a room and being like, all those people felt like my friends, you know, like, you know, I like to leave situations like that. So when I have shows that are that kind of good, even like if a show is like not going not as well as I want it to be, like connecting with anyone is the primary importance for me. So any show that I connect with people, I think.
You have that sort of conversational style. So, I mean, how big does improvisation play a part in your performance?
I think it depends on my mood. And I think it depends on how much I want. I'm genuinely quite interested in people as a whole. I mean, not everyone, but there are some people. And so, you know, like, I'm just a girl who wants to be understood. So I think it becomes quite conversational. I also think like that was quite a fundamental thing in terms of my growing up in my comedy career. It's always been like stand-up comedy is a conversation. Like, I mean, I conversate more than I should probably, but in terms of like you know, you're talking and the laughter is a response because like that's a flow of conversation, and so I think that's when I feel most myself and most present on stage.
Yeah. Do you set yourself any kind of objectives about what you want to do and where you want to be in like 5 years or 10 years, or places you want to play and people you want to work with, that sort of thing?
Yeah. But I don't put any pressure on in terms of like nothing is like I always think that what's mine is mine, and what's meant for me will be mine. So if I don't fixate on something that's like, oh, I need to have this, because sometimes you get to that point and you're like, oh, it's not as actually, maybe it won't be as fundamental, you know. But there's also personal goals that I have, like what I want to do and what I want to achieve in a time period. So I think that's more so where my goals go.
Yeah. What do you feel is the most important lesson that you've learned so far? The sort of maybe something you would tell your younger fledgling comedian self?
I think staying in my lane, and also like what's meant for you will be yours. I think comedy, the biggest battle with comedy is the comparison. I think that especially with social media now, it's constant. We're constantly fighting to be like, no, I don't have to compare myself to that. Or I don't. Sometimes I'll think to be like, ah, oh, God, I wish I got that. I'm like, I don't even want that. Like, you know, it's just like that's what social media just makes you have that mentality. So fighting against that, I think, fighting against that, I think is probably the biggest lesson that I'm continuously trying to learn.
So what do you think have been so far the best and worst experiences you've had as a comedian?
I think best experiences is just like figuring out who I am. I think it's a really it's such a, for lack of better words, blessing to be able to do something where my whole career and my whole work is essentially digging deeper and trying to figure out who I am and what I want. And I think that's such a privilege to be able to work on that daily.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the journey itself. And also like, I mean, this year the being able to do comedy wherever I go is there's no better feeling. Like we talked, me and Ali was, because we went to Brazil together.
Mm-hmm.
We would constantly be talking about like, I just can't believe this is our job. Like, we only did a few shows, but like it's really cool to be able to like have such a transferable skill. All we really need is like a handful of people, and I mean we had more than a handful of people, but like like all we really need is like, we don't need much to do it. And it's really cool to be able to connect with people around the globe.
Yeah.
I think the hardest lesson you said?
Best and worst, but I mean, you interpret that as you will.
The worst thing I think is sometimes I think you think that society's progressed in terms of the views of their views on women, and I think especially when you do clubs, I think you get a bit more exposed to some mentalities that are quite, I mean, maybe more backwards, or they're less progressive. And I think also when you go to smaller places, or smaller, like when you go outside of a big city, I think those realizations are quite difficult. And I also think that, sometimes you just feel like you're like, oh, and it's when you've been doing comedy for like I've been consistently doing comedy for at least 8 years now. And sometimes it's, you think that like it's like, okay, people are used to seeing women on stage, and then sometimes you're like, oh no. And I think there's a sentiment of being like, I know there's people in the room that don't like me just because I'm a woman, and it's a hard feeling to explain to people, but it is there. And I think when you have pockets of that, especially in 2025, that's probably the hardest to deal with, because most of the gigs I do, especially around London, are like, I don't have to deal with that anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think that's the hardest.
Yeah. You said about when you're in a community of comedians and everything you talk about sort of comes back to comedy. Do you get, when you're on stage, that opportunity to talk about deeper issues or more personal things, or are you comfortable being in a group of people who will look for the joke in when you open up like that?
Yeah, I mean, not everyone, not every comic, but I mean, like most of my closest friends they know everything about me, and I think it does make it. It makes it. I'm quite a transparent person. I don't I think it's nice, but it's also a big flaw. And yeah, I think it does help.
Yeah.
I think also you build up to it, you build up to, there's still certain elements of myself that I get super nervous to talk about on stage, but there's also elements that I've grown into being able to talk about. So it does help to be able to talk to comics about it before, but then some comics have a different viewpoint, and also how you sell things or how you say things can change. So yeah. So
how can listeners find out about you and where they can come and see you performing?
My Instagram is where I post most of my stuff. My Instagram handle is KDG Comedy, and I post all of my shows, but my biggest upcoming show is I have my debut hour, I'm Misha. It is going to be at Soho Theater, June 9th and 10th. So that's probably the best place to see me.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so then my final question, as always, is, Katie, how would you sum up comedy in a nutshell?
Gosh, my I guess if it was one word, I'd say essential. And comedy is important. It's the most important thing. And not even just, I mean, comedy as a whole. I mean, just being able to laugh at things.
Yeah.
That's, I guess I'd say essential.
Katie, thank you so much for being my guest. It's been fantastic talking with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. This has been so fun.